Hey guys, it's FREEDO here, back with another dev interview. This is one of two videos with developers. The first one was with Matthew Hawley. We'll leave the other one linked in the description if you missed it. And this one is with Scott Mercer, who is the principal designer of Overwatch, and Ben Dye, the concept artist who worked on the cinematic that just got released featuring Deva named Shooting Star. In this interview, they discuss the process of making new cinematics, upcoming reworks in general, but specifically the Torbjorn one, and if there's any possibility of us getting a map veto in the future. Jumping into the first question, Scott's asked about his favorite feature in the new map, Busan.
Yeah, so there's a lot of really interesting native instruments, like drums. Like there's some pretty big map features that we actually spent a lot of time recording with, I believe it was the university in Seoul. Was it?
Yes. It was the University of Korean Arts.
Yeah, we actually recorded them playing all these instruments, and then when you hit them, you'll actually hear that sound. So like our sound, after doing all that recording, our sound team, they went in and basically placed those sounds so where they activate.
So that's where the sounds are, is when you like interact with them yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that, I won't go into all the details. You guys can experience that when it goes on PTR like later, but there's some interesting Easter eggs in the city as well that I think people will really enjoy.
Well, Deva is a very important character for the game. Why did it took so long for her to get an own animation? Is there any reason for that?
We've been talking about it for a long time. I think we're just waiting for the correct story that fits. And also, we sort of timed it at the same time the Busan map came out. So it's kind of by coincidence, kind of not.
Yeah, I mean, we've been wanting to do a Korean map for quite some time. We've been wanting to do a short with Deva at quite the same time. A lot of it was just lining up schedules and figuring out exactly when was the right window to do this, and that window is now.
Overwatch is evolving. New balance patches are added very often, and they keep the game healthy, of course. You said once how you decide about which hero needs changes, this so-called triangle. Statistics, your intuition, and players' feedback. So yeah, let's talk about players' feedback. On both Reddit and your official forums, there are tons of suggestions. Obviously, not all of them are great, but there are specific, very popular ideas. Take Sombra, for example. I consider myself a Sombra main, and there is one very neat suggestion. And I could say that pretty much every Sombra main would like to see this buff. So adding damage threshold to hack and invisibility so that microscopic damage wouldn't break these abilities. I'm sure you heard about this. What are your thoughts on this Sombra suggestion and frequent suggestions in general? I'm curious because even if you don't agree with them, which is fine, sure. Wouldn't you like to answer questions more often so people could move on?
Yeah. So Sombra is a really tricky hero for us to balance. A lot of the data shows that in normal online play and matchmaking, she doesn't have that great of a win percentage. So we recently made a suite of changes, the ones that allowed her to keep stealth infinitely until it gets broken or she breaks it. Same thing with the translocator. And even after those changes were taken, there was some mixed reaction to that from the community, which we realized. So we thought about making some additional changes. We started playtesting some of those. And then all of a sudden we saw in, say, NA contenders scene and some of the other pro scenes that she was getting used a whole lot with a lot of success. So we're having to reevaluate some of those to make sure that at the same time we want to make her good and fun for players who want to spend a lot of time with her, that really enjoy the character, that want to learn her and the best ways to help their teams. But at the same time, we don't want to accidentally make her something that's a must pick that the pros really end up using quite extensively. So we're still working on that. A lot of the there's definitely still room for changes. We're still looking to that. A lot of the changes we've done so far have been concentrating on things like making her less clunky and more usable. We want to get her in a state where she's more intuitive to play, and then we'll continue to like monitor like the really data-driven balance elements. And if there's additional like quality of life things we can do to her, we'll also look at those.
So animated shorts are an amazing way of introducing new characters, and so far we've seen the Sombra one actually telling us something about the story. Do you like have in mind to continue to introduce the background of every character like you just did with Deva, just to like give a context to the heroes, or are there going to be maybe other ways to tell the players how the Overwatch story is developing after Winston's recall of the heroes?
We pick a story based on our heroes, obviously, and sometimes we want to go back in time to tell their origin story. Sometimes we want to tell a story in a slightly non-chronological order. I want to say that. It just really depends on the story that we want to tell. There's not really a chronological order for all the shorts that we're producing. Hopefully, eventually, you kind of look back and then seeing the whole picture, we might be able to say, hey, you know what, we did this in a way that sort of best represent each characters. Maybe some of the like for the Deva short, even though it's not directly related to Overwatch story, but it's definitely introducing the map as well as give the audience a glimpse of who Deva really is, which I think is very important, and I think it's hopefully it'll be well received by the audience.
Yeah, all of the animated shorts, all of our comics, the introduction to missions like Retribution, those are all really wonderful world-building exercises, and they all have little bits of story that expand about Overwatch. Again, not just about like the backstories of particular like heroes, but just what's happening now, what's happening in the world, the challenges that are being faced, how Overwatch is evolving. So we'll continue to do those. We'll find little bits of story, and based upon what the story is, we'll figure out, hey, what's the best way to tell that story? Is it with an animated short? Is it with a comic? There's lots of other like different means we've talked about, so we'll just keep on doing that because universally everyone loves like the characters of the world. They want to see more of this. They're all very intrigued about the world of Overwatch, and we're still just super excited about expanding that.
If I can add, is it planned to show us maybe through an animated short, like what happened with the collapse of Overwatch, the first collapse, like when they thought Soldier was dead, and like the huge event, the central event of it? Is it planned to maybe show the players what happened?
I'm not sure exactly what we have like planned for that. We'll just have to sort of see on that one. Definitely I think there's some interesting stories to tell about that, the falling out between Reyes and Soldier 76. So. Yeah, but I'm not, again, we know that that's there. A lot of it just comes down to, well, hey, what's the right way to tell that story? And then when's the right time to tell that story? And at this point, I'm not sure.
And sometimes, if you guys voice the need for a story and we're listening, and if there's enough people asking for a certain story that really want us to flesh it out and make it into an animated short, who knows? Maybe we'll make one.
So thank God we've got a new animated short. I guess I'd like to know, why does it take so long to produce the animated shorts? Like, when did you begin working on the Deva animated short? So
it's funny you asked this question because last year around this time, that's where I started working on Deva. Usually takes about a year. Generally, 9 months to about 12. Depends on the length and how much resource we can develop. Obviously, Blizzard Animation does also cinematic work for other franchise. We have to support the entire Blizzard franchise. So You know, it just really depends. Usually it's about a year. It takes a lot because we went from story development to actually putting in the story script, and then from script translating to 2D animatics, then 3D, creating all the assets, even though we can use a lot of the assets from the game team, but we still have to create a lot of the stuff. Animation is a huge time sink because we hand animate everything. There's no motion capture in any of our animation. Effects plays a huge role. I thought Reinhardt was the big effects budget buster, but turned out Deva did the same thing. So yeah, I mean, every time we try to push it just a little further to squeeze every single penny out of our budget to make sure that we produce something that's good.
So how far ahead do you plan with the animated shorts? Like, if you got the next two, I guess you're working on right now, on one right now, if we're
maybe
where you should be. So like, do you have like, are you two in advance sort of thing, or?
Usually we got a couple cooking in the oven. Some in various stages. Some could be in storyboards, some could be in production, some could be just in our heads. You know, like maybe one day we'll make we'll be cool if we make one short. Cool. Let's think about it and then talk to the game team. Maybe there's a map that they want to release and we can coordinate.
It's a very similar thing with heroes and maps. I mean, I think we have 4 or 5 different heroes in stages of development. We have at least 2 to 3, actually more than that, like maps also. It's just a process that takes some time to get right, because you want to allow enough time to also like make changes as new creative ideas come up during the process. So it's something we're just gonna. It's just how things work, really.
Hi, I have 2 questions, not directly related to the animated shorts or the map. It's about the social systems that you started introducing. Mm-hmm. Especially, I would like to ask about the looking for group function that they've added to the game. Yeah. It works really great for quick play. I think it made quick play really, really that much better. But I've seen that people use it less and less for competitive, because, for example, one of the issues is that whenever you join most competitive groups, people ask you to show your career or you get kicked. Okay. It's much more closed now compared to before. Do you have any plans to make LFG more, I guess, work better for ranked? Because right now I feel like this system is getting a bit way less used than it should get for ranked.
Yeah, we're definitely looking for feedback in those areas, and we're making changes to that is something we're definitely looking to. If there's ways that we can improve LFG. LFG is always going to be very tricky for like the really high SR like players, just because there's not that many of them. I know there's like some players that have gone in and said like, hey, I'd love to be able to use it, but there's just not enough people looking for the groups to be able to form them. So that's always going to be a problem. That's going to be difficult to solve. But I think for someone that's more like, in the mid tiers, we definitely want to make LFG a way to make good competitive groups, something where it's like, I mean, a lot of this is just about like, hey, finding 5 other people that want to play the same way as you, and have the same goals, so because that way you could just have a much better time when you actually play it. So if there's suggestions that the community has, we'll definitely look at those. I believe one of our other designers is already like looking to making some like improvements in just the UI flow, just to make it a little bit easier, because any tool like that, the harder we make it to use, the less people we get to use, and the less people use it, the less useful it is. So we'll definitely look to improve it.
Okay, and do you have any plans to change how endorsements ranking works? Because right now it's quite easy to farm it in quick play and then have a high endorsement level, and like I don't get the feeling that it means anything right now. I feel like most players who play a lot have a high endorsement level. It's not showing particularly that they are less toxic or more good guys. So do you have any plans to change that as well?
I believe there's still tuning changes to be done in terms of just how easy or hard it is to get to certain like levels. We put numbers to all those without knowing exactly how people would end up using, how popular it would be. So I think there's definitely going to be some rounds of adjustments to that. We definitely don't want, if you see someone in endorsement level 5, you should know that that person is a great person to play with. They're a good teammate. And if there's too many people at that endorsement level, it definitely loses some of its luster. So we'll look at that. There's some we'll definitely we've got to report of potentially some bugs, some like misunderstandings about how some of that stuff works. Again, we'll keep on adjusting that as need be.
Okay. And last question
Sure.
was initially the second question is about potential, since there's more and more maps added to the game, like right now there's actually a lot of maps compared to when Overwatch released.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a veto system that is maybe planned someday when there's like just many maps and some players just don't want to play some and want to focus on training on some maps?
Sure. We'll have to see. I'm not sure necessarily if a voting system might not be the best, because I feel like there'll be just a lot of maps.
I meant veto, like a ban like you can ban some maps before queuing up. You mean?
Yeah, I don't know if voting or a map pick ban. I don't know if it's necessarily the best thing for Overwatch as a whole. If there's issues with individual maps, we should be looking to fix those issues, right? We don't want to just have a map that the community feels like, oh, that's crap, and it goes away. I think if we get to the situation where there's so many maps that you once a month see a particular map and you're like, I don't even remember this map anymore. There might be something where for every competitive season we limit the number of maps that might be within that season to a specific list. It's something like you saw in OWL stages where there was different maps. I don't think we're quite there yet, but it's something that we're keeping an eye on, and I agree, as we add more maps, and we're going to keep on adding more maps because they're really fun. They're really fun to make and add so much to the game that we'll need to adjust as we get there.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, the stories that I want to see, spaghetti western McCree animation, definitely. That's one that I want to see. I think it would be fun. Just to follow on about some questions about competitive and ranked and all that kind of stuff. Do you see it as part of the fundamental Overwatch experience that players have to play every sort of map? Because I know that there's a lot of players out there that would, for instance, if they were just solo queuing, they'd kind of maybe want to give 2CP a miss, for example, right? They might want to be like, you know what, I actually, this session I don't want to play Volskaya, or I don't want to play this mode. I want to play Control for an hour. Would that still be competitive for you, or do you think it is players should have to play all those modes to sort of get a rank and go up the ladder? Do you think players having that much control is good or bad for the game? I suppose is my question.
Yeah, I think there's just a very difficult balance to achieve there. I mean, certainly a lot of the systems that we've been adding lately in terms of LFG is about giving players more control to form form teams. Some players want to say, hey, let's do a 2-2-2 comp, and they can set that up within LFG, and that kind of control is great. The giving control of whether or not they play specific modes or whether or not they play specific maps or even heroes, potentially is, I think, a bit scarier to us. So we have to be very careful about doing anything that would, potentially that would obsolete any of that kind of content. So it's something, again, we'll never say never, but for right now, I think we're much happier having 2CP. I know there's certainly been parts of the community that don't particularly like the mode, but we've been trying to, again, improve it. If there's issues with elements of our game, the first reaction from us shouldn't be, well, let's just throw it out. It's hey, well, what's the issue? Let's work with the community, figure out what the issues are, and see if we can improve those. So all this content that we've made that a lot of people do enjoy can be enjoyed by even more people.
Since Torbjorn's rework is around the corner, let's talk about reworks. How do you decide which hero is next in the line? Do you think in the future there would be a situation that specific hero is in a perfect state, but they would get interesting changes anyway? For example, there are heroes without an alternate attack, an E ability or a passive. Of course, it doesn't matter that they are worse, but let's say Winston would get something on right click or Bastion under E key. So the question is, what's the root of reworks and how will they look like in, let's say, distant future?
Sure. We definitely don't want to make change strictly for the sake of change. So all of the reworks we've done have when you talk about Symmetra, I think the most recent one that's a very major rework. We wanted to do that because the community had a very negative opinion of her, and there were definitely some issues with regards to the way that she was actually really strong if you could last long enough to build up to the ult, and if she was on defense, there were situations where she was actually really good. She still actually amazingly had a 60% win rate at some point. So, but we saw that there was the issue where, hey, we want to make her better on attack. We want to make her better without requiring a lot of snowballing. And that's a similar kind of thing I think with Torbjorn. So if we see heroes where there's problems that make players not want to play them, or if they're very niche, that's when we sort of take a step back, try to see if we can make adjustments, and then make the appropriate ones. I think with this latest patch, you also saw, I think, a lot of smaller balance adjustments to, we made smaller adjustments to the supports to try to bring them a little bit more in the line. Our balance philosophy has been actually changing over the years as we understand more about our game, and we're continuing to learn more about the game because the meta has definitely changed over the years. The community's what they expect out of us has changed quite a bit. We've definitely learned a lot of lessons when you look at Mercy and how we handled that. So I think going forward, we'll just continue to look and say, hey, is there an issue with this hero? Does it need to be changed? And if so, we shouldn't be afraid to make that particular change. But again, we don't want to necessarily if Winston is a good place and everyone's happy with it, we don't want to necessarily well, let's change something and screw that up. That's not what we want to do, right? So.
All right. And do you have any details on Torbjorn's rework?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any details on Torbjorn's rework? New details, because we learned.
Yeah, it's coming along. I don't think it'll be in the next patch. Again, we're definitely trying to make him so where he doesn't require so much of initial success. Like right now, if you play him on defense and you actually win the first couple fights, you've got plenty of armor packs, you've got molten core available, and then he actually can really contribute to your team. So we're potentially we're actually looking at maybe changing his ult completely around, how you deploy the turrets. We've actually been trying a lot of different things with him. Torbjorn's always been a very difficult hero to develop because of the nature of his turret and all of his other abilities. So we don't have too much to talk about, but yeah, I mean, again, how you deploy it, looking at the ultimate, and so that's making it so it's not so snowbally. Those are some of the big things we're looking at.